My sister Kate was always the quiet type, not much for sharing her own opinions. She'd usually go with the flow, not really asserting herself. You wouldn't believe what happened to her. I'm Jennifer, by the way, and I live with my husband James. Recently, we heard Kate got engaged. Her fiancé is George, a high-flying exec at a well-known company. Kate worked as a receptionist at a firm that did business with George's company. They met when he struck up a conversation with her at the front desk. Apparently, she was into him, and they started dating. Things moved pretty quickly, and they got engaged. George visited our family home once to formally announce their engagement, and let's just say, I didn't get a great vibe from him.
Ah, you must be Kate's sister. Nice to meet you. I'm George.
He had this way of talking, like he was looking down on you, almost like he was flaunting his success. Maybe I was just overthinking it, but at a certain point, my suspicions were confirmed.
What? You didn't even finish high school?
The moment George found out I hadn't gone to high school, he said that. And that wasn't all. Throughout the conversation, he made several demeaning comments about Kate, calling her,
"Hey you,"
or
"You there."
I was convinced George was the type to belittle others. Even during dinner, he criticized me for no reason, suggesting I couldn't appreciate the food's flavor.
"I'm making over $100,000, you know,"
he bragged at one point, flexing his financial muscles. All in all, he left a pretty bad taste in my mouth. After we'd wrapped up the engagement introductions, George left. I decided to ask Kate what she really feels. Hey, do you really love George? Or maybe you're not that into him? Kate stayed silent, not saying a word, but her face seems like she wanted to say something. I couldn't help but think she was confused. What do you really want, Kate? When I asked her that, she got angry and retreated to her room. Kate has never been one to express her opinions. Did she get engaged to George because he cornered her? Or because everyone else was pressuring her too? I can't help but wonder. As time passes without any real answers from Kate, the wedding day approaches. Also, George came to our house and said to me,
"Is a dropout like you coming to my wedding? Gross."
Seriously, I'm the one who should be grossed out. He looks down on people based on education and assumes he's better than everyone else. I despise that attitude. Excuse me, do you really love Kate? I decided to ask George, and his answer?
Why would I even have to answer that?
Why can't he simply say he loves her? Does he even love Kate? Will she be happy marrying this man? I couldn't stop thinking about it. I went home and told my husband James about George.
Is that so? Kate's fiancé is such a terrible guy.
James, as if it were about him, was concerned about Kate. We both thought about how to help Kate, but couldn't come up with any good ideas. So the wedding day came. James and I arrived at the venue. James went to the bathroom first. Then George saw me and approached, saying,
"Oh, you came? We didn't prepare a seat for a dropout, so could you please leave?"
What? No seat? That's just cruel, no matter how you look at it. I don't care if you look down on me, but not being able to witness my beloved sister's wedding is just too painful. I tried to find a way to get in, but George was unyielding.
"No seats for dropouts, haha. What are you doing to my wife?" "What?" Why is George here?
James knew George's name even though they never met. It seemed George knew about James as well. Actually, it turns out that James and George work at the same company. What's more, James is an executive, while George is just a regular employee.
Who would have thought my sister-in-law's husband would be you?
As James said this, George seemed visibly flustered.
I can't believe you're Jennifer's husband.
Wondering what was making George so uneasy, James revealed the truth. Apparently, George had been claiming to be a top-notch employee, but he was actually notorious for taking credit for other people's work.
We've talked about it at the office many times. He just won't stop taking credit for things he didn't do. It's causing the younger staff to lose motivation and even quit.
This was a new low. Here he was bragging about how great he was while doing some really nasty stuff. But George started making it pitiful excuses.
No, you got it all wrong. I believe this kind of adversity will help the employees grow, so it's all for the best.
What's he going to say now? What a ridiculous argument. If he thinks taking credit from others makes them grow, then he's the one not growing at all. My irritation started to boil over. To think that Kate had been belittled by such a man.
George, no matter how much you think you're doing it for the employees, if it's not fostering growth in the younger staff, then it's pointless. The company suffers without new talent. We really need to reconsider your role going forward.
Upon hearing this, George became even more frantic.
What does that matter now? Today is a joyous wedding ceremony.
The same joyous wedding ceremony you tried to exclude me from? Now George was trying to treat me with a newfound respect. He only changed his attitude once he found out I was married to James. This is unforgivable. You should stop looking down on people just because you think you can beat them, I said. George got angry at that.
What are you saying? You're still a nobody who dropped out of school. Just because you happen to marry James doesn't give you any value.
George's rapid-fire insults were unbelievable. I thought it took some nerve to say that in front of James. Just then, Kate arrived. Jennifer! Kate appeared wearing her bridal gown, but her face didn't look happy.
What are you doing? Get back here!
George yelled, but James stopped him.
Kate, it's been a while. You look beautiful. I've heard from Jennifer. Are you having second thoughts about marrying George?
Kate looked down in silence after hearing what was said.
Kate, you do want to marry me, don't you?
George seemed like he was intimidating Kate. If she marries him like this, Kate would forever live a life looked down upon by George. I wanted Kate to speak her mind. Kate, sometimes you need to express how you're feeling in your own words. If not, you'll end up tolerating things you don't like forever. Kate was quietly listening, looking into my eyes. Then, Kate started to speak softly. I actually don't want to marry George. Kate finally spoke her truth. George was furious, of course.
Don't joke with me. You're going to marry me. Don't think you can have an opinion like you're some sort of person.
James stepped in to stop George's tirade. Kate continued speaking. Truth is, George, ever since we started living together, you've been bossing me around. I do all the chores and you never even say thank you. And if I try to say something, you just tell me whose money we're living on. I couldn't say anything to George anymore. It seemed George had been heavily oppressing Kate. No wonder Kate, who was already passive, had stopped speaking her mind. George went pale as his terrible deeds were laid bare.
You're joking. That's a lie. I do my own chores. Stop lying.
George was yelling, trying to find an excuse. But of course, neither James nor I believed him. So, you've been acting like a king all this time. Huh, George, you're just terrible. As I said that, George glared at me, his face turning red.
A dropout has no right to talk to me like that. I am way above you.
A person who only sees others based on their education or status and believes himself to be above everyone else? It's just ugly, I thought.
George, you've been a burden not only at work, but in your personal life too. Why don't you reflect on that?
James said to George. James also looked pretty mad. Other people began to gather around as they noticed the commotion.
I haven't done anything. Kate's just making stuff up.
George started making excuses, saying he did nothing wrong. At this point, I'm too disgusted to say anything. Kate continued to expose more of George's wrongdoings. There were times he was physically abusive to me. It's been very tough for me. Recalling the time she was hit, Kate began to cry as she spoke. This is unforgivable. Doing something so horrible that it makes Kate cry like this?
Don't you dare say another word.
What do you mean, don't dare? You have no right to talk after hurting my precious sister. I won't let him hurt Kate anymore. Thinking this, I stepped in front of Kate to face George.
Who do you think you are, dropping out of school like that? Kate probably doesn't even have much of an education, but she gets to marry a guy like me. She should be grateful.
Happiness doesn't come from marrying someone who's so-called successful. At least, Kate didn't seem happy being with George. George, no matter what you say, it won't change the fact that Kate herself doesn't want to marry you. James nodded in agreement. Yet, George kept insisting on the marriage.
What are you going to do? The wedding ceremony is about to start and everyone's gathered.
We're sorry to everyone who came, but it seems like the only option is to call off the wedding. Kate herself has said she doesn't want to marry. Give it up, George. You're the one in the wrong. This happened because you made my sister unhappy.
Don't look down on me just because you dropped out.
He's still going on about dropping out. People like him, who judge others by their education and background, will never change. Especially at his age, it's unlikely he'll change his ways. There's no way we can let George and Kate get married. Now that we know Kate doesn't want this marriage, we'll take her back home. I took Kate's hand and tried to leave the venue.
Stop! Where do you think you're going?
I'm taking Kate home. She said she doesn't want to marry you.
What? You can't be serious. There's no way we can cancel the wedding.
George tried desperately to stop us, but Kate was clearly repulsed by him. Why force a marriage when there's no love left? I think George just wants a convenient servant, Kate said, trembling. If he still wants to marry even when he knows he's not loved, what else could it be? Kate is not your servant, so back off. Despite what I said, George had no intention of backing down.
Let go of Kate. Trying to take the bride home, how absurd. This is why I hate people who drop out.
I think it's far more absurd to look down on your spouse and treat them like a servant. Is it because he's looked down on others his entire life that he doesn't understand basic decency? It's laughable that he thinks he's so superior. James spoke up.
Why don't you just give up? We're planning to discuss your future at the company. Better to apologize now before you embarrass yourself further.
Despite what James said, George never apologized. Perhaps his pride is too high for him to admit he's wrong. This is what happens when people get too full of themselves, I thought.
James, I didn't do anything wrong. That's true, isn't it? An average person marrying someone with abilities. That's a given, right?
James looked at George with cold, disbelief-filled eyes.
Your mindset is exactly why you're in this mess. Can't you even imagine why Kate is crying, or why Jennifer is mad?
James spoke in a calm tone, but George still didn't get it. At this point, words alone wouldn't get through to him. As George attempted to approach Kate, James and I held him back. Just then, a cell phone fell out of George's pocket. The screen displayed a message from a contact labeled Mistress. A mistress? Upon hearing me, George quickly retrieved his phone.
No, that's not it.
Could it be? He had a mistress while promising to marry Kate? I kind of had my suspicions. You'd come home without eating a single bite of your lunch, or stay out late without saying a word. So that's what it was. Kate said, "This guy is rotten to the core." I was at a loss for words.
I told you, that's not it. What are you talking about, Kate? I don't have a mistress.
No, it's obvious. All you've done is leave the household chores to me while you have fun with your mistress. Wasn't that your plan all along? Kate yelled out loud. The usually reserved Kate did that. She must have been really angry at George. The crowd started to gather around, drawn by Kate's shouting.
Oh man, he's got a mistress.
What a lowlife. The poor bride. Such comments could be heard from the gathering crowd. George grew more frantic upon hearing them.
No, it's not like that. I didn't do anything. It's all in Kate's head. I'm not the bad guy here.
George's desperate excuses fell on deaf ears. The wedding was effectively off, and everyone started to leave.
Wait, don't go. Where are you going? Come back. We're still having the wedding.
Even as George yelled, people continued to leave. As we started to escort Kate out, George hurriedly followed us, shouting,
Wait, you're not getting away. We are having this wedding.
George, I don't ever want to see your face again. The wedding is off. Don't show up in front of me again, Kate declared coldly. George sank down to the floor, wailing in resignation.
Why? Why did it have to be like this? My wedding!
The wedding was canceled, and Kate called off her marriage to George. George ended up footing the entire bill for the canceled wedding. Later on, he lost his job and ended up penniless and lost. Years later, Kate found someone new and got happily married. She was very thankful to James and me for helping her dodge that bullet. We assured her that she had made the decision to call off the wedding herself. Seeing Kate happy makes me incredibly happy too.